G20. The striking thing about this meeting in London, in which the so-called 20 most economically powerful countries in the world had a summit, was that they were invoking old institutions like the G20 itself, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Basel Process, the Financial Stability Forum. These are all the institutions that were implicated in the financial collapse and the current crisis in the real economy. And it's fairly clear to me that these institutions are not going to cut it, and that we are going to have a period in which the stabilization of the global capitalist economy will be tried through these failed institutions, and it will fail. And then after that is, we don't really know at this point what's going to be coming, but clearly, because they have the mentality, the approaches, the perspectives, the institutions, and the ideology of the old order, it's going to be very difficult for these institutions to have any sort of meaningful stabilization of the system to take place.
And why is that? Because of their methods, or because...
Well, because of their perspectives, because of their methods, because of the interests that control them. Any kind of effective stabilization of the system is just not going to happen through these institutions. Like, for instance, the IMF, it's been given $750 billion to give to developing countries, but in order to have as a stimulus package. But one is that this is far too small, and secondly is that the IMF is going to come in, and it will most likely live up to its old personality of demanding conditions from these countries that are very, very difficult to perform, because they go against the interests of those countries. And so countries will basically be faced with the choice of do you take an IMF program and go back into the same conditionalities, or you try to get money from somewhere else, like China, for instance. So I think that confronted with this choice, many countries would probably much rather go to China. That's not going to be imposing any conditionalities, like it hasn't over the last several years.
Or to Venezuela.
Or to Venezuela, yes.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is that this is a period of crisis, and it's also in period of crisis that you have a very fluid situation in terms of solutions. And this, of course, as everybody has said, this is the worst crisis since the Great Depression, and it's not going to be solved with standard methods by going back to the old free market solutions, the old lack of regulation on finance and big capitalist interests. I guess the important thing to realize here is that, one, this is not just a crisis of finance capitalism, this is a crisis of capitalism, okay? Very, very deep into the dynamics of capitalism itself. Secondly, that it will be the facts on the ground, the lack of legitimacy of finance capital at this point, and the very terrible situation that people are in, that will determine the actions of those people like Obama that would like to save the system. Because I don't think we should say that the solutions that will be proposed by the state managers of capitalism, will need to adhere to the old free market prescriptions. Basically what I'm saying is that there are no red lines that they cannot cross in their effort to stabilize the system at this point in time. And finally, I think it's going to be very important to realize here that many of these schemes to stabilize the system might involve some concessions, to the majority of people, that they might involve, some concessions to developing countries, but all in perspective, all in the spirit of trying to have a revived global capitalist system. So that's really what we're in at this point.
Do you think it would be a good thing for capitalism to revive?
Well, this is a very interesting point of debate at this point in time, because some people basically, are saying that there is no alternative to capitalism except a reformed capitalism. And for me, I think that we really need to be talking about post-capitalist systems, that we're really talking about this being an opportunity to be able to push, the kind of cooperative alternatives that we've been saying all of these years needs to be able to supplant a system that is controlled by a few and is based on the exploitation of the many and the marginalization of the majority of the people of the world. And, there are limits to which you can reform such a system. And the only problem at this point is limits to the political imagination that people have, that we have, okay? Because the neoliberal assault, meaning the free market kind of ideological assault of the 80s and 90s, was so strong that people in the progressive movement had their political imaginations limited by what is possible. Now, we should be really thinking at this point about what should be and what can be possible, instead of allowing our imagination to be trampled by the so-called realistic, imperatives.
We don't get much news from Asia, but what we did hear about was some political protesters forcing the cancellation of ASEAN. So, can you talk about that?
Well, I think the cancellation was good, because ASEAN and, the other country governments that were supposed to be part of this were going to basically just have a talk show, as we call it. But in terms of the cancellation, I think the people with red shirts were really aiming to topple the government of a visit in Thailand, because they feel that it is not a legitimate government, that the legitimate government is that of Thaksin Shinawatra, who is in exile at this point and who was ousted by a military coup in 2006. Basically, what you have is class warfare in Thailand. It's the what is called the establishment, meaning the army, the monarchy, the urban middle class, the Bangkok-based middle class, versus the rural and urban poor. And the rural and urban poor have now gotten behind the figure of Thaksin, who's a populist billionaire who has many contradictions, but people still remember him for the universal health care that he had, the the big grant of money to the villages for them to be able to revive themselves after the Asian financial crisis, and the pardoning of the rural debt. So people, sort of, these were of course very self-interested measures for popularity that Thaksin did, but people remember those. And now the establishment feels very threatened that he was creating this class-based alternative center of power in Thailand, and this is why he was ousted in 2006. So as far as progressives are concerned, they've been split. They've been split between the two sides, because some people basically feel that Thaksin is a demagogue, that he's using the poor for his own ends, and those that say that, well, yeah, he may be a demagogue, but the poor and the marginalized are behind him at this point, and there's a much bigger sort of crisis that's happening here, which Thaksin himself won't be able to control for his own ends. That basically Thaksin has just been a mechanism through which people awoke to what they were really after, which was to push their own interests as people. I think we will have a continuation of this polarization in Thailand. I think that the current government really has the stamp of illegitimacy, and Thaksin continues to be very popular. So I think that, you know, there will continue to be very, very strong rifts until there is a new election that is called. And of course, Thaksin's people are going to win these new elections again, you know, because they're very, very popular. So I don't see things ending in a managed way. In fact, a lot of people think that Thailand's headed for civil war.
What do you think the appropriate push from the people of the grassroots and the should be in terms of our economic crisis? Is there anything people at the bottom can do?
Well, I think definitely the people basically saying at this point that the bank shouldn't be bailed out. That's very, very important to really push that as a demand. Secondly, that there should be stronger popular controls over the direction of economic policy, and that there should be consultation of people in terms of, you know, what are the solutions that you know, are going to propose, you know, the kind of, you know, stimulus packages that people should be brought into active decision making around these areas, instead of just having, you know, a technocratic elite associated with the people in power in Washington determining things. So I think this is the time when people should really be pushing for economic democracy at all levels. So my sense is that there is really, you know, when people say, you know, think of just the short term because we're in an emergency, I think that's really a fallacious way of approaching it, that even the short-term measures that we proposed at this point, you know, should have a long-term component. For instance, you know, when we talk about, you know, saving the financial system, we should also be talking at the same breath of saying, well, you know, this is a financial system that should not just have profitability as a criterion, but social responsibility, that, you know, into the building of loans, into the kinds of loans that you have to give, you should have environmental criteria set up. There should be social criteria. And enough of this financial system, you know, that was run solely on profit. So, you know, these are the kinds of things that really need to come in at this point. And, you know, that the decision making, for instance, when we're talking about the nationalization of banks, it shouldn't just be the government taking over. It should be citizens' councils being constituted to run the banks. So, you know, so these are short-term and long-term solutions coming together. The people who are going to screw up this process are the people that say, oh, let's just think about the emergency measures first, and then let's talk about the long-term later. That's really not the way that a good, you know, alternative will come out of this crisis.